Once upon a time, there lived an old billionaire named Charles Bradford. He had made his fortune in the technology world, building an empire from scratch. His company, Bradford Enterprises, was one of the most successful in the world. But as time passed, Charles became more and more isolated. His health was failing, and his family seemed to be more interested in his money than in him as a person. Charles had 3 children, his eldest son, Andrew, a successful lawyer, his middle daughter, Olivia, a renowned artist, and his youngest son, Ben, who had just started his own tech company. Over the years, Charles had noticed that they only visited him when they wanted something, an investment in their business, a donation for their charity, or a loan for their latest venture. They rarely came to see him just to spend time or ask how he was doing. One day, Charles decided he wanted to find out how much his family really cared about him. He had never been one for games, but this time, he was willing to test the limits of his family's love. He came up with a plan. He would pretend to be gravely ill, making it seem as though his time was running out. He would see if his children cared enough to visit him, or if they would only show up when it was convenient for them. Charles did not tell anyone about his plan. He went to his doctor and asked for a vague diagnosis, something that sounded serious but not entirely specific. The doctor, who had been working with Charles for many years, knew something was off but agreed to help. Charles then told his family that his doctor had given him only a few months to live. When the children heard the news, they started arriving. Andrew, the eldest, was the first to arrive. As a successful lawyer, he had a busy schedule, but he dropped everything when he heard the news. He arrived at Charles's mansion in a hurry, his suit neatly pressed and his briefcase in hand. Charles could hear the sound of Andrew's shoes clicking on the marble floor as he walked into the room. "Dad!" Andrew said, rushing to his father's side. He hugged him briefly before sitting down across from him. "I can't believe this," he said, shaking his head. "We need to talk about your will. We need to make sure everything is in order." Charles, still pretending to be frail and weak, nodded slowly. "Yes, Andrew. We'll talk about that soon." But before Charles could say anything else, Andrew was already pulling out a legal pad and a pen. "I want to make sure everything is clear. You don't want any issues with the estate after you're gone, do you? We should go over everything now, just in case." Charles felt a pang of disappointment in his chest. He had hoped for a more genuine conversation, perhaps a heartfelt discussion about their past or their relationship. But instead, Andrew's focus was entirely on what he could get from his father. It was as if the idea of just being there for Charles never crossed his mind. "How are you really feeling, Dad?" Andrew asked, though his eyes never left the papers he was scribbling on. "Have you talked to the lawyer about the details?" "I'm fine, Andrew," Charles replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We'll talk about all of that." But Andrew didn't seem to hear him. He continued making notes, his mind clearly elsewhere. Charles watched him in silence, wondering if Andrew would ever realize how little he was actually present. After a while, Andrew left, saying he had to get back to work. "We'll finish this later, okay, Dad?" he said, giving Charles a quick, distracted hug before walking out the door.
Welcome to the Billionaire Love Tale channel. Do like and subscribe to our channel to watch more interesting stories on billionaire love, romance, heartbreak, and scandals.
Charles sat there, feeling the weight of the moment. He had always known that Andrew was driven by ambition, but today, the coldness of it all felt overwhelming. Andrew hadn't asked him how he was feeling or if he needed anything. He hadn't shown any real concern, only a desire to check off the boxes of what needed to be done. It wasn't long before Olivia arrived, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. She walked into the room with a bright smile, her arms full of art supplies. "Hi, Dad. I brought some new paintings for you to see," she said, setting down the bags in front of him. "I'm working on a huge show, and I thought you'd love to see the progress." Olivia was an artist, and her work was her passion. Charles had always been proud of her, but lately, it seemed like the only time she visited him was when she needed his approval for her art or, more often, for money. She had been in the middle of preparing for her latest gallery exhibition and had been so busy that Charles could count on one hand the number of times they had spoken in the last few months. "I'm glad you're doing well with your show, Olivia," Charles said, trying to sound enthusiastic. "But how are you doing? How's everything?" Olivia didn't seem to hear him. She was already unpacking the art supplies, excitedly showing him some of the paintings she had been working on. "This one is going to be huge, Dad," she said, holding up a canvas. "I'm hoping it will really take off. The critics are already talking about it." Charles nodded, though he felt a deep sense of sadness. Olivia didn't ask about him or his health. She didn't even seem to notice how tired he looked. It was as if he was just another part of her world to be managed, a tool to help her career along. As the visit went on, Charles tried to steer the conversation towards something more personal, but Olivia's attention was always elsewhere. She was more interested in discussing her art shows and career than in spending time with her father. After an hour, she kissed him on the cheek and told him she needed to leave to get back to her preparations. "I'll call you soon, Dad," she said, but there was no real sense of urgency in her voice. Finally, Ben arrived. The youngest of the three, Ben was the last to show up, looking slightly disheveled from his busy schedule. He had been traveling for business, but he made sure to visit his father when he heard the news. "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" Ben greeted him with a warm smile and a quick hug. "I know things have been crazy lately, but I'm really glad I could make it over." Ben was the only one who seemed genuinely happy to see Charles. He sat down next to him, asking how he was feeling and making sure he was comfortable. But even Ben couldn't resist talking about his own business. "I've been working on this amazing tech project," he said, pulling out his phone to show Charles the details. "I need some funding, and I thought maybe you could help me with an investment." Charles watched as Ben spoke about his work, his excitement obvious. But just like his siblings, Ben didn't take the time to ask about his father's feelings. It was always about what he could get, not about how his father was doing. As the day came to an end, Charles felt a deep sadness. None of his children had truly seen him. They hadn't noticed how he was feeling, how lonely he was becoming. They hadn't asked if he needed anything. They were too caught up in their own worlds to really care. Charles sat in his chair, looking out the window at the setting sun, feeling a deep emptiness. This was the family he had worked so hard to provide for, the children he had loved and raised. But now, he felt more alone than ever. It was in that moment that Charles realized the painful truth: his family, for all the wealth and success they had forgotten what really mattered. They had forgotten him. It was during one of these visits that Mrs. Davis, his loyal housekeeper, came to check on him. She had worked for Charles for over 30 years, and she had seen everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. She had always been more like family to him than his own children. "Mr. Bradford," she said, sitting beside him, "I've noticed how your children have been treating you. They come and go, but none of them truly seem to be here for you. They're all focused on what they can get from you, but they've forgotten what matters most." Charles sighed, feeling the weight of her words. "I don't know what to do, Mrs. Davis. I've spent my whole life building this empire for them, but now I feel like I've lost them." Mrs. Davis shook her head. "It's not too late. You've raised them, given them everything. But now, they need to understand what really matters: family. Love. Time together. That's the inheritance they should value." Her words struck a chord deep within Charles. He realized that he needed to make them see the truth. He wasn't going to leave this world without making them understand what was truly important. The next day, Charles called his children together. They arrived one by one, each still preoccupied with their own concerns. Charles waited until they were all seated before speaking. "I've been pretending to be sick," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I wanted to see if you would come to me out of love, or if you would only come when there was something to gain. The truth is, I've been feeling alone for a long time now. I've given you everything, but I don't feel like you've given me anything in return. Not your time, not your love." Andrew was the first to speak. "Dad. I didn't realize. I thought I was just doing what needed to be done. I've been so focused on my career that I didn't stop to think about how you might be feeling. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Dad. I've been wrapped up in my art, but I should have been there for you. I never meant to hurt you. Ben looked down, clearly ashamed. I've been so focused on my business that I didn't realize how much I've been neglecting you. I'm sorry, Dad. You're the most important thing, and I should have shown you that. After the confrontation, something incredible happened. For the first time in years, Charles's children began to truly spend time with him. They stopped talking about their businesses, their careers, or their investments. Instead, they listened to his stories, laughed with him, and spent genuine time together. They started cooking for him, playing chess, and reminiscing about their childhood. Charles realized that his children had not been entirely lost. They had just been caught up in the fast pace of their own lives. But with a little push, they were able to see what was truly important. The love and time they shared with him became more valuable than any amount of money. In the end, Charles didn't need to test them to know they loved him. What he needed was a moment of honesty, a way to open their eyes to the simple truth that family is what really matters. And in the end, his legacy wasn't in his fortune or his empire, it was in the love he shared with his children. And that, he knew, was the greatest inheritance of all.
Thank you for watching the Billionaire Lovetale channel. Please, do like, comment and also subscribe to our channel to enjoy more interesting billionaire life stories.